Hello, I'm Scott Abel, and welcome to The Content Advantage, a talk show about technical documentation and other types of product content for people who make that content and participate in its creation. Today, I have with me on our show my special guest, Sowmini Sampath, Senior Director of Documentation at MathWorks. Are you on the line and can you hear me? Tell me that you're coming through loud and clear.
Are you speaking to me, Scott? Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right.
I'm happy to be on the show. And thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, listen, I'm going to tell the audience who may or may not have been an experienced viewer of our show a few things about today's show. First of all, you should know that today's show is being recorded, so that if any time you need to leave the show a little early, don't worry. You can come back later and use the same URL that you're using to watch today's live show to catch a recording of the show that you can view on demand whenever it's convenient for you. You can also share that link with others so they can watch the show if you think that would be valuable for them, and we'd really appreciate that. Also, we don't have access to your camera or microphone, so we can't see or hear you, so you don't have to worry about that. And if you have a question for our guest at any time, you can ask a question by using the Ask a Question tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. Clicking that button will open up a little text window into which you can text a message in a question. If you'd like us to know your name, because we can't see your name when you submit the question, make sure to append your question with your name so we can address you by your name. Also, there's additional content located in the attachments section, which is located underneath your webinar viewing panel near the Ask a Question button. Clicking that will open up a little document repository that has some information in there on troubleshooting in case you have any audio or video challenges today, as well as contact information for our presenter today, and also some information about our sponsor, Sowmini Software. So definitely check out the attachments section anytime during today's show. All right, well, let's jump right into this interview. Let's talk a little bit about the topic of today's show. First, could you tell us a little bit about yourself for those audience members who might not know who you are? What do you do in your career, and how are you related to today's subject of the show?
Sure. So I have been at MathWorks for almost 17 years, and all of that time in technical documentation. I was a researcher in academic settings before that. I was really looking for a way to combine my love of writing and science together. And MathWorks, the technical writing position, really seemed like a perfect fit for that. But along the way, I discovered that really the most fun comes from working with fantastically smart people who are all there for the same reason, which I'll get into a little bit when we talk about what the MathWorks does. So here I am 17 years later, and I really still enjoy every part of my work. And you asked a little bit about how it's connected to what we're talking about today. And I'm going to speak a lot about that because I think that is a topic of interest to a lot of people in this position in technical writing. We're looking for a way to understand, okay, what do we write about? What value are we providing? Are our customers liking what we write? And how do we make it better?
Excellent points. And I love the fact that you're so passionate about your job and that you still enjoy it and that you love what you're doing. That makes me smile. So thank you very much. Let's get this interview started, though. Today's topic is actually centered around how we identify, adopt, and put content metrics to work in order to help our organizations succeed. Mm-hmm. Before we dive in, could you tell our audience a little bit about MathWorks? What does the company do, and what is your technical documentation team responsible for?
Sure. So I'll take the first part of the question first. Let me start with what the MathWorks does. We're makers of MATLAB and Simulink, which are technical computing products that are really very well known in the engineering and scientific community. MATLAB lets you analyze data, develop algorithms, and create mathematical models. And Simulink lets you run simulations, generate code, and then test and verify embedded systems. And then in addition, we develop many add-ons that extend the capabilities further in machine learning and AI, in control systems, in automated driving, and many other areas. So our goal is to really change the world by accelerating the pace of discovery, innovation, development, and learning in engineering and science. And so we really work to provide that ultimate computing environment for technical computing, for visualization, for design, simulation, and implementation. And we use this environment to provide innovative solutions in a wide range of application areas. And you asked then about, our technical content development teams. And so, as I said, is the work that we do really has to back up and support our customers in that innovation that they're driving. And we're a team about 160 worldwide. That includes writers and editors. And as you can imagine from the description of the software that we develop, we primarily write for engineers and scientists. And our goal is to have a mix of examples, reference, and conceptual topics, and we optimize our content for online usage.
Thank you. That's a great summary, and I appreciate that. Building content teams can be challenging, and we've had lots of guests on the show kind of talk about the challenges and how they overcame them. Finding the right people seems to be one of the requisite skills and critical to success. Before we talk about the data that we're going to talk about today and why we should keep track and analyze certain kind of metrics, could you briefly share with us your hiring strategy? What do you do at MathWorks to ensure that you get the right people on the team so that you can build the solutions that you want?
Yes. So again, very deep emphasis on the domain. And so we're really looking for those STEM degrees, and we're looking for the ability to essentially translate those domain solutions into things that our software can do and help support our customers in their goals. And so we hire engineers and scientists and other people with math backgrounds, and then we train with basically our standards framework and the consistency we're looking for. We look for ways that people can come together into a common framework and provide their domain knowledge. And our content authors are very well versed with the workflows that our customers have. And then we provide them with that framework so that they can put their content into the framework, make it optimized for online, make the content searchable, and essentially provide all the content that I just talked about around examples, which are a mainstay of our work, and then around reference and other topics that help support what customers want to do.
Providing data, I guess data-backed or science or evidence-based decision making is an important trend in the technical communication industry. It's not just what writers think anymore, but we're actually using data. Just for clarity, could you help our viewers understand what you mean when you say data?
Sure. So I'm just going to reflect back a little bit on my early days at MathWorks as a technical writer. Even though our content was online, I really didn't have the ability to tell how our customers were, what they were looking at, what they were using at the time. This was obviously many years ago. And so I wrote user guides with chapters, perhaps meant to be sequentially consumed. And I heard fairly often, oh, the users don't read the documentation. And I really didn't know what that meant because there was no data to back up whether they were reading it or not. And you could interview your users, but from a scale-up perspective, really understanding how many users, what does the traffic look like? There was none of that. So when I first heard about the idea around being able to track that traffic, that was really exciting. And we really, as a team, have invested a lot of time thinking about how do you provide that data to writers. So it's not just traffic volume, it is search keywords, it's customer ratings and comments, and even revenue. How does revenue drive what you invest in? So those are the kinds of things I mean when I say data.
Excellent. If we take it a step further, what do we mean when we say data-driven? I think sometimes there's some confusion about what it means to collect metrics and why we do. But I think that this is a very specific thing, a data-driven technical communication team. What does that mean in your vernacular?
Okay. So when you're thinking about data-driven, it means that every part of the team is thinking about how you're prioritizing your work based on the data that you're seeing. So basically understanding as you're developing your content and then putting it out there, being able to measure your usage and being able to measure where people are going and what they're looking for means that then when we are reflecting back on what the content looks like. So again, it's a very iterative process. And that's what online content helps you do. You take your first guess. You have to know your audience, and our engineers and scientists, we know their workflows and we know what kinds of problems they're trying to solve. And so we do that. We start to write the content, and then we're quickly looking back and asking, well, what does the usage look like? And where is the content performing well? And where are people sort of either not finding the content, because search is such a big part of the way that users find our content, and then asking, how can we make this better? So when we say data-driven, it means you can make the first cut through traffic. For example, you prioritize your content based on traffic volume and based on traffic data. And then you ask yourself, well, where do I invest my time?
That's very interesting. I wonder if you encountered any of this too. When you started to recognize the importance of using data to make these decisions, did you come up against any, I guess the writers tend to be focused on writing rules, as like, this is the strength we have, is that we communicate. And I think what you're saying is we can learn things and then communicate based on what we learned from the data. Is it because you're a science organization, do you think, that that's your focus? And did you run into any obstacles trying to convince technical writers, for example, to use data? Or do you think that because of the organization that you work for, science is kind of baked in and so it's expected?
So I actually want to back up a little bit and say, the team is really an ensemble cast. I'm saying these words, but they're a representation of what the entire team thinks. And we're consistently hearing, in fact, that we want that kind of data. So part of it is, yes, I mean, this is something I wanted as a writer, and I was asking for it. And it turns out that that's a pretty consistent comment that we're getting in terms of wanting to prove to ourselves that, there's something about being able to say, I wrote this page and here's how much traffic it's getting. And here are the customer ratings that come with that page. And here are the comments that come with it. There's an immediate value to what it is that I'm doing. And especially as a writer, and the people we hire, they come, with their domain experience, they really come to help our customers. And so our writers are very excited about getting that iterative feedback around how their content is doing. And I believe that it actually plays well into the strength of technical writing, which
I appreciate that. I wonder if maybe that's something that ought to be contagious and that other technical communication teams could, catch and run with, because it seems like the feedback on the value of what you're providing is instrumental in knowing whether you're connecting with the audience or not. And oftentimes technical communicators have probably felt like they're not as close to the audience as they would like to be. And depending upon what they write and for whatever, organizations they serve, there may be very valid reasons it's difficult to get a hold of. If you write for the military, you may or may not be able to talk to some soldiers. But I think your client base is trying to solve problems using the tools that you're giving them. Is that correct? And so you have to be flexible about how you communicate with them. And so this data must play a really critical role in helping to ensure that you're in alignment with your users.
Absolutely. When we began to reflect, again, I want to emphasize how much of a team conversation this is. Many years ago, we began to reflect on how much time we were putting into writing about new features. And the idea that really, if you think about it, customers are using familiar features for a very long time to work on the problems that they're solving. And we have to make those existing features more accessible, more discoverable, easier to use. And that means both product innovation as well as I should say software innovation, as well as documentation, being something that is essentially a very essential part of how customers use our products. And so when you think about the metrics, they're really about understanding how customers are using our existing content and how we can help that both improve our documentation as well as our products.
One of our viewers would like to know, do you have any examples of how evidence or data-based decision-making has helped you make a decision that is provable, that's valid, that was a good change, and now you can not only be confident because you have a gut feeling, but you have the data to back it up?
Well, I mean, a very simple and very big scale up of what we've been doing is around how we write examples and our data around what customers want. When you look at traffic to pages with examples, you see a clear distinction around how many people want to continue to come back to those pages. The other thing is when you do sentiment analysis around customer ratings, essentially examples jumps out, good jumps out, well done jumps out. When you see all of those words together, you know what they're looking for. And so there's a lot of evidence to show you exactly which direction to go in and what kinds of content makes the most sense for customers.
And one of our viewers wanted to know, how are you measuring the sentiment? Is it a simplistic measurement, like a tag cloud looking for words, as you pointed out, good, bad, or are there more complicated metrics, measurements that you're using?
Very simple. Very simple. We can, and we try to model certain things. We use our own products for a lot of our analysis. One of the words that we like using is drink your own champagne. Our products are used for many of these things. And so a lot of our analysis actually is done in our products, but it doesn't have to be very complicated. Sentiment analysis can be as simple as a word cloud, just to see what's going well or what's going wrong.
And do you have any other indicators on the page that allow a viewer of the information to provide you with feedback so that you could have more evidence to make decisions in the future?
Again, we've kept both our instrumentation as well as our tracking pretty simple. We have customer ratings there's a 5-star rating at the bottom of the page, mathworks.com/help. That's where all of our documentation is. Anybody who's listening can go in and look at our documentation and actually tell us what's good, what's bad, and what you'd like to see us do differently. We welcome that feedback. And the customer ratings and the mechanism by which that we collect that data is essentially 2 simple screens. There's a star rating that we almost get immediately as soon as you click that. And then there's a screen where you can tell us more about what you liked or what you didn't like. And that's something that content authors are continuously looking at to see what they can find to be able to make the content better.
Great. One of our viewers would like to know if you would tell them what you mean when you use the word cloud.
Mm-hmm. Very simple, just the typical word cloud that you find where you see that the strongest sentiment or the strongest words basically come through the biggest in the word cloud. So you can do that by product area, you can do that for the whole documentation. And by that, I don't mean about the content. I'm just still talking about the customer ratings themselves. The customer ratings that are accompanied by free text comments, you can go and look at those and ask questions off that content and ask, what jumps out when you see it. That as simple as that. There are more complicated ways to score things, and we're not using any of that at the moment.
Okay. And so just for viewers that might not have tried these tools before, you can Google or use your favorite search engine to look for free word cloud generator or tag cloud generator. Either one will probably pull up a variety of tools that you can use. For example, the Content Wrangler uses that tagging mechanism, that cloud mechanism, to paint a picture of the anecdotal content comments that we get from our survey that we do every year. And when we ask people to share their opinions with us, it's not as easy to tabulate as a yes, no, or some kind of multiple choice. So we have to use the tag cloud generator to kind of find out what words are being used most often. I think it's also the approach that services like Google use to help tell you which keywords are the most popular, which is really about frequency. So I don't think it's telling you much more than these words are used very often, and so therefore they must be important. Have you found value in this importance versus unimportance, the size of the words in the tag cloud? Do they align to what you expect them to?
It's it's definitely a very rough granularity. I certainly, again, we get in, we talked a little bit about this, Scott, when we were talking about the show. But the idea around data maturity and what kinds of data make the most sense for you to measure and what kinds of questions you want to be asking of your data. So word clouds are only one small tool in our toolkit. We tend to use them on a periodic basis, but we don't go and look at them all the time, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And just for viewers who are looking at trying to measure sentiment, it's a good first step, I think, is what we're talking about today. And you may find that your needs will be bigger than that, but I think it's an easy way to jump in there. And speaking of easy, we've got tons of questions coming from the audience, so I'm going to try to get you to jump in and take a few of these that I think will be really easy for you to answer. Do you translate all of your support documentation, and if so, into what languages?
Yes. CJK figs, I think, at the moment, and we're looking to keep expanding.
Okay, great. And what technology do you use? Let me see. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty getting to this question. Give me 1 second. What technology do you use to set up the rating system for each help page?
Excellent question. We are currently using Get Feedback, which I think is now SurveyMonkey, and we're using the data that comes from their database.
And that's a third party application, I think, that you subscribe to. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And then do you use DITA for your content?
Nope.
What do you use?
Well, we're on DocBook.
Ah, interesting. One of our viewers was curious to know that. Let me check out one of the other questions here. How do you elicit comments from customers? We have a feedback mechanisms, but very few people use them. I would have to say that's my experience as well. Tell us a little bit about your feedback and how do you elicit comments?
Sure. So again, the higher the traffic to the site, the more likely that you're going to get comments. And as our traffic to the documentation site in general has improved, we definitely see a higher percentage of users giving us comments. I think it's always going to be a much smaller percentage than the number of users in general and the number of people who are using the doc in general. It's really about trying to understand whether the comments are in the context of a larger group of people. So one thing to remember is when someone's really satisfied and happy with things, it's much rarer for them to tell us, that things are going well. Although I will say that our ratings that are 5 are consistently going up, which I'm really happy to see. And it's telling us we're doing something right. But, we definitely hear from our share of people who want to hear other things from us and who want us to write, content about work that they're doing. And when we hear that, we look at it and we look at it in the context of all of our users and where the use cases are, and then prioritize, how we're going to write content for users who are, and it's all feedback is good, honestly. I mean, when we hear about things that are not looking good, it really makes us pay very close attention. So you asked about the volume of the feedback we get. One thing I will say is, switching over and trying out various design mechanisms for our surveys has helped a lot. We are continuously experimenting with where the survey is and how we're designing it, whether it's sort of right next to the content or at the bottom of the page. All of those design questions are things that you and your team can be asking yourselves and trying to experiment with some of that. And we continuously try to optimize on how much, how many ratings we're getting. And we're paying attention to those numbers as well. When we see dips in the number of ratings, then we do go ask ourselves why we're seeing that dip and how do we make it better.
I love that. And I think that it's also important that we learn from other industries. And I recently have been watching some videos that kind of made me addicted for a little while. Mm-hmm. And it was the folks at Staples, the office supply store, mm-hmm. and they tried to move their products around in different places in the store and then measure whether or not those movements affected the number of units that were sold, or people stopping to look at the products, that kind of thing. Is that what in essence, you're talking about, placing the feedback mechanism in different places to see if the placement itself actually impacts participation?
Absolutely. I think when you're thinking about online content, one of the nice things about being able to be online means that you can change things and you can look to and track the metrics on what has changed, and then decide whether that's something that was the right direction to go in or not. And so and even just, asking yourself whether customers are being able to find your ratings. That's not, we're looking at, are they able to find our navigation? How often are they using our navigation system? When are they getting out and looking at search instead? What typical behaviors would you look for, that you design something and then you have to continuously iterate and ask whether your metrics are showing that the design is working or not. And being online means that you can continuously change, so that you get better at helping customers, which is ultimately the goal.
Excellent. So this would probably be a really good time for me to tell the audience members, if you haven't asked a question yet, and thank you for those of you who have submitted questions. I see them, and we've got a couple more in queue. You can do so by using the Ask a Questions tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. Clicking that will open up a little text-based window into which you can text a question to us. We won't be able to text you an answer back, just know that. And if you'd like us to know your name, make sure that you append your question with your name. All right, a few things before we jump into the types of we're going to get some examples on the types of metadata and analytics that MathLabs is trying to put into place and to find valuable. So before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about today's sponsor, Sowmini Software. It's a company that transforms technical product content into dynamic and intuitive experiences so people can find the answers they need to use your product or service to the fullest. Sowmini is a cloud-based solution that allows you to streamline content operations and gain powerful analytics so you can refine your content strategy and improve customer self-service, which of course we all want to do. If you'd like to learn more about how Sowmini Software can help you do that, you can point your web browser to sowminisoftware.com, or you can take a peek in the attachments section located underneath your webinar viewing panel, where we have some links to some content provided by Sowmini Software. I'd like to thank Sowmini for being our sponsor of today's show. I really appreciate it. All right, before we do that, let's jump right over to the questions. All right, so we have some great in-depth questions. One, you and I had talked about 4 different kinds of, I guess you would say, ways that you can look at the data. And I think if I'm correct, we first started with traffic, and then we've got a couple other ones. Can you walk us through each one of these examples of the kinds of data that a technical documentation team might find valuable based on your experience?
Sure. So I'll start by saying that, again, you don't have to get too fancy with traffic volume. Our content authors have data on the pages that they own, and they can see relative traffic to parts of their own set of documentation. And they work with their product teams to essentially decide what it is that they need to be investing in. And on the flip side, product teams use that knowledge to understand where users are going and to get a better understanding of what our users are finding and using in our products. So there's really a very mutual collaboration that happens between documentation and software development to ensure that we're all rowing in the same direction. So that's just about traffic volume. And that really is sort of the mainstay where we're prioritizing content based off of where customers are essentially leaving their footprints. And then there are the customer ratings and the comments, which is the other thing we talked about. We, again, provide data to our content authors on, they can access essentially both the traffic and then the accompanying ratings that come with it. So any given page, you can see, what the traffic was, you can see what ratings were provided on any given period. And then you can also see any customer comments that came with that. So you prioritize first based off of traffic to understand, okay, what do I want to do about this? But then as you're thinking about, well, what was it about this page that needs to change, then many different factors come into play. Of course, you're thinking about customer requirements, you're talking to customer-facing engineers, you're talking to marketing, you're talking to your developers, and any and all of those come into play. But when it comes to the quantitative numbers, then you're looking for, is the rating a 1 or a 2, or is it a 3 and a 4, and you want to then improve it further. So again, that helps you prioritize, what to work on. And then and I think, this is something that many people in the audience might be in the same boat, which is that it's not always possible to get customer ratings or comments from every customer. Some of our customers are not online, and they, so we have to figure out, well, if they're not online and they're not represented as a customer voice in our pool, then what other ways can we go after what those customers need, and are we investing in the right place? And that's where a combination of traffic and revenue come in. So if there are products that are high revenue generating, but you're really not getting that much traffic or ratings on them, that still means that you're going after those products and investing time in them so that you can provide those customers the best experience. These are products that you want to support. They are part of the repertoire that the company has, and want to make sure that we're paying attention to all of those different factors as we decide what we're going to prioritize.
So you look at traffic volume, which makes sense, right? If we don't have people looking at our content, they can't consume it. You look at the ratings when they do consume it, and if they choose to leave some kind of footprint, I think is what you said, some kind of digital footprint, evidence, right, that they were there and that they have an opinion about it. Revenue, you touched on for just a second. Could you help us understand that? Because I think some technical communicators may say, wait a minute, she just said the money word. I'm not in the money department. What does that mean? How is money involved in this?
Yes. Money in the sense that when customers spend on our products, and we in turn want to give them the best experience, I mean, we're pretty mission focused, I will say, in terms of accelerating the pace of science and engineering. Those are words that probably are something that resonate with everybody in the company, and we really do take that mission pretty seriously. So when it comes to revenue, it's the good point that, it's like, well, do you want to think about the money? Absolutely. Because again, it's a representation of customers that are probably not coming online to be able to give us their voice. They're talking to us through other means, through customer-facing engineers, through our salespeople, through our tech support. So we're getting all of the anecdotal, more qualitative evidence that they want stuff, and we want to make sure that we are listening to them. And revenue is a way for us to quantify that. So it's a way to say, okay, here are 5 products that we don't hear much online from these customers, but they're definitely products we want to pay a lot of attention to because they show up on the other side around revenue.
And so what you're trying to make the argument, I think, is that if you're going to prioritize, this might be one way to prioritize that aligns nicely with the goals of the company, right? We want to sell our products to X number of customers. And if we do, and we have customers that are there earning us money, we want to support them and be faithful to the mission of educating them and keeping them up to date on our products so that they can actually fulfill their goal, which is to get to the end, right? And make the benefit happen from your products.
Yes. Our content is a product differentiator for us. So it's very much a very valuable part of our product. And I believe from everything I've heard that our customers really appreciate our documentation. And it's really about sticking to that high standard and then continuing to improve upon it.
Here's a question from the audience. Do you consider your content to be marketing? Does it impact the way someone, prospective customer, might view MathWorks and help them make a decision whether they should, invest in your product or not?
So I think in the way the question was phrased, do we consider our content marketing? I'd like to answer that a little bit differently. Our content is about achieving customer goals. It's about understanding the problems they're trying to solve and understanding what they're trying to do and making sure that they're able to do them with the software that they're using. If your content is online and searchable, then absolutely your content is going to be both pre-sales and post-sales. So our content is discoverable through search, which means that many of our customers are coming to us before they buy our products to see, well, what is it that these products can do, and will it serve my purpose? So yes, we really are providing our content to serve both of those needs.
Here's a question from the audience, which I think is kind of interesting. How do your customers who aren't online access your support content? Or maybe it was to say it differently. What did you mean when you said some of your customers aren't online?
Yes, we have installed documentation. It's the same documentation, and you can install it. Our content is optimized for online, but it is also provided to customers with our desktop applications.
And what tools do you use to measure traffic on each of your support pages?
Adobe Analytics is pretty much where we're at. We didn't get into this yet because one of the 4 things that we talked about was around search keywords and how we're using search keywords. So, I think you mentioned this, Scott. Google AdWords is one of them, where you can really look and see how frequently a search keyword comes up or not. So we use a combination of those kinds of tools to both track as well as to answer our questions.
Excellent. I've got another question from the audience. While you're doing everything to increase traffic to your site, how do you ensure quality of your content?
It's a great question. So I guess I would like a clarification when you say quality, what that means. Increasing customer ratings is one form of quality. There's technical accuracy. There's, documentation that's free of errors. There's being able to find the right thing at the right time and have it answer your question. All of those things for us rolls into some form of quality. And you can find various ways in which to essentially meet your own goals. And so the question is, how quantitatively do you want to measure quality? And there's ways to do that. And they really are about, I think, technical writing teams asking themselves what things are the most important in your content, in your documentation that you'd like to measure, and then ask, well, how do I want to measure it? I know there's tools out there that you can use. In our case, we basically have developed our own tools to be able to both measure quality, and then we have bug tracking systems that we also, use to track our bugs. And so there's really sort of the external facing, here's my customer rating, but there's also an internal facing, here's what I think the rating is, because we have standards for all of our content, and we can actually measure ourselves against our standard and ask how far away from the standard any piece of content is.
Is it important for a technical documentation team to not only ask about the metrics, but to have a plan for what they're going to do with the data? In other words, if you're going to collect the data, shouldn't there be a plan for how you're going to use it?
Yes. And that's something that I think should be in the backlog all the time, and you pick up and do basically as part of your planning. So it's not just about providing the content that's right in front of you and the new features that are being developed. It's about making the time to make sure that where the highest traffic is and where our customers are, being able to look at those and make time to go and improve the content in those areas. It's how do I say it? It's continuous improvement. It's part of MathWorks core values. It fits right into what we want to do. And so that's something that I think we all just get behind, and we plan and make the time for, and our product teams understand that. It's something that we've talked to them about, and they understand the value behind it as well.
One of our viewers would like me to ask you if you could talk a little bit more about your internal standards for quality. What are you looking for specifically?
Funnily, I think that it's its own show all by itself.
Yeah, I think I agree. We could do an entire college course on this, but what do you think just from witnessing what you've done there, are the elements of quality that you're able to kind of have a standard for so you can measure against?
Of course. So I think there's some there are things that if you go on the MathWorks where the MathWorks documentation is, and you start to see that there are our pages have a certain cadence to them, and they all have certain types of content that are a must-have for each thing. So it can be anything from, well, do you have your function syntaxes? Do you have your input and output arguments described in a way that makes sense for the user? What are your standards around each of those things? And you can measure that using the schema that you have and the metadata that you put in. You can measure that using human, auditing. It's however you want to do it. And I think that every team has to choose for itself what kind of time and effort you want to put into that and what it means for your organization on what you want to measure. So when we look for stuff, we're looking for that consistency, that when users go from one product to the next, they should be able to expect like they're working with a single seamless sort of workflow, and whether it's 80 or 100 or 150 writers, content authors developing the content, it feels like we're speaking with one voice, and that comes through the measurement of those essential elements on any given page and asking ourselves, are we writing to those elements?
Here's some specific questions that relate to MathWorks. So apologies if I use any jargon. That's MathWorks jargon. I'll let you help us understand what that means if I dive too deep. So one of our questions is, in open source tools such as Google Colab and Jupyter Notebook, it's possible to use Keras and NumPy for ML and DL algorithms. Which packages or tools is it possible to use in MATLAB for developing computer vision and reinforcement learning algorithms? I hope that means something to you, because that was a lot of jargon there for most of the audience members. Can you take a stab at that?
I almost feel like it was it's very easy. If we have toolboxes for computer vision, we have toolbox for reinforcement learning. I'm only smiling because these are, I feel like they're easy answers, but they come from our fantastic software development teams. They're the ones that are the experts, and we have essentially extended add-ons for any number of applications. And the two that are a part of this question are products that we actually develop for those specific applications. So yes, they are there, and they're part of the packages that are add-ons beyond MATLAB and Simulink, and our customers own a variety of those sort of packages and add-ons to be able to do their work.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Also, one of our viewers wants to know, on the subject of quality, if you use any quality control terminology management tools to help you with consistency, things like acrolinks or Congree, I would imagine, is what they're aiming for there.
No, I think, those are, again, they're decisions that you can make as individual companies and what your goals are and what works for you. We have a team of editors, and they work very, very closely with our content authors. So they're very, very familiar with our standards as well. And so that's one of the sort of gates that we have. We're looking at I think you're talking about maybe terminology management. And in fact, the XML tools that we use provide some measure of that kind of stuff. Because MATLAB is so much of it is code that customers are writing, and so much of our content is code that we're writing. We have, ways to do terminology and spell checks even through MATLAB and through, any XML editors that we're using. So those are, like, again, combination of things that we're using to be able to ensure consistency and high quality.
Excellent. And the related question is, how do you control delivery of the content so that the right piece gets to the right person, as opposed to here's everything, find it yourself mechanism?
Can you say more about that question, as in so that the right piece gets to the right person? Do you mean as in
Well,
personalization?
I have to interpret this person's text-based question, but let me just say that most companies are struggling today with how do I get the right content to the right role? So it's a person who plays a role. For example, if I work at a bank, I might be the bank branch manager. Another person might be a bank teller, and you might be the security in charge of the bank. You, as a security officer, need to know what the job of the cashier is, the teller, and the manager, because you're securing the bank in fact, not just against criminals external to the bank, but you need to know what managers are supposed to be doing to know whether they're doing it correctly. And you need to know what the teller is doing to know whether they're following the rules. But the teller doesn't need to know that you, the security person, is doing that. So we want to hide the security information from the teller, but we want to allow the security person to see the teller information. So we have to have role-based, personalized delivery of content. Do you have anything like that where you're trying to deliver the right piece based on some kind of criteria?
So there's only so I will say that the vast majority of our products are essentially, they're searchable by anybody and usable by anybody. Where the role-based stuff comes in is probably during our installation process and in our cloud services, essentially. And so in both of those places where there are special installs and special admin work that comes with that, and the system administrator has to be the one that's doing that work, we have to get into some role-based stuff. And that could be a combination of online versus specific PDFs that we deliver to people who are very, very specific and very niche in their role. But other than that, our content is something that we write knowing our audience as a very large group of engineers and scientists. They may all be very specific and deep in their domains, and we have to understand what it is that they do, but they can all find each other's work. And because it's such a collaborative community between our MATLAB Answers, which is our community forum, or other forums out there where people are talking about our products and trying to understand how to work with our products to solve their issues. We're essentially keeping our source, our content very open so that people can find it and use it in the way that they want to.
Excellent. I think the point there is about the difference between you making content available for people to find, which means that they must take an action to go find it, and then delivering that content to them. So if they were to land on the page and you knew that they were a particular role, you would want to optimize their experience by moving content that's irrelevant for that role out of the way. It doesn't mean that they couldn't go find it if they needed it for a specific reason. But is there any mechanism in place to do that yet?
No, I'll be honest, that does not, like I said, there are places where we could and we should go and optimize further and personalize based on the role. But again, it's a question of priority, and when do you want to invest in work like that, and what do you want to do, and what is that effort going to take, and what's the ROI on it? So we continue to drive personalization and want to understand more about where customers want to have those kinds of things pushed to them. You can do, recommended pages. You can do ways in which that you provide content that's specific, because the branching between shared products could be something that you say, okay, if you have this kind of product, then, use this combination of workflows. So we do some of that, but I would not say that we have a solution that you are looking for in terms of I'm a teller and I want this kind of stuff, because I don't think that our content is meant to be consumed in such a role-based way. There's too much cross conversation happening between various different products and the various different examples for that to happen. We could be better, but that's where we're at right now. So there's always room for growth.
Well, and I think you're in a good position because you're actually using evidence to make business decisions about how you're going to grow. So let's talk a little bit about a few in-depth topics here. One of them is kind of something I wanted to pick your brain about. For technical communication managers and technical communicators who are watching today's show, can you tell me, is there such a thing as too much analysis?
Yes, I think that comes back to the idea around data maturity, and data mature data can range from something really simple that tells you that something's wrong to something that's predictive and tells you what's about to happen. And when you go down the analytics path, as most of you listening probably already know, there's a lot of data available at all levels. There's traffic data, there's clicks, there's paths, there's segments, there's bounce rate. There's a number of them. But what we've found that we really have to be judicious about what we use and really think about the cost and the effort to process and analyze everything versus the actions required to provide customer value. So we really have to ask ourselves how we plan to scale up. How do we provide that consistent data no matter what time period we're using to track the progress? And how do we make that data much more self-serve for content authors so that they can look at it and understand exactly what it means and then use their training to essentially take the right action? So yes, I will say that my team is very careful about what data they will let in. And I do say that in a way that says my team, because we discuss and debate a fair bit about what data we want to let in and what it means for our team and how content authors are going to use it. We get ideas from content authors who've found ways to analyze their data, and then we ask them for more information about how they did it, and then how do we take one person's idea and then let 120 other people use it. So it's really about looking for those ideas and then channeling them and funneling them up so that not it's one person who started it and it's really good, and then you want the whole team to be able to use it. But again, you don't want to let data in that causes more confusion in the way that you're interpreting it, because that's going to be counterproductive. So just because it exists doesn't mean that you have to use it. It has to mean something. It has to have, it has to be able to answer a question. So some of the words that I used just now, when the volume of the content is much lower, for example, if you're tracking 5 pages of really, really important content, so marketing might do that, where they've put out something about a new product and it's a new area that we're going into, and they're really tracking and measuring the leads they're getting and what it is the content's about. And you might even do heat map analysis or where people are. But with the volume of content that we have, we don't want to have to go and do that level of in-depth analysis on every page to get the value that we think we can get from essentially analyzing broader trends and asking ourselves, well, what do we need to do to fix the problem?
Now, speaking of that, what have you learned from monitoring pre-sales and post-sales traffic to content?
Mm-hmm. So I think I touched on this a little bit earlier when we talked about pre-sales, and I think an audience member had asked, well, is your content also marketing? And so I will say, yes, our doc is on the web. And so when people are coming into our doc, we really just want to give clear and accurate information. And whether it's for you to help you decide whether to try our products or to solve a problem that you're facing with existing products that you have. And that means not just troubleshooting, but really using our proof of concepts and our solutions to then extend your innovation and fulfill your goals as an engineer or a scientist. All of those things are part of writing good content. If you have trial or download links on your documentation pages, you can certainly track how many leads were received through your documentation, and maybe marketing will want to keep an eye on those numbers. Our content authors are not basically paying attention to marketing leads or any of those things. We're really focused on providing the right information at the right time
I think this word marketing gets people confused. So let me clarify for members of the audience. What we're talking about actually is when a consumer, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is looking for information, they want to find it in the way that's most convenient for them. And if they go Google your information and they can't find it, that's bad marketing, because now they're going to have to go and look for the information, and they may get frustrated and confused, which means that they will have a negative view of your brand. And so most of the time when technical communication teams admit that their content is marketing, what they're admitting is that it can have an impact on the desire for someone to continue down the pathway to learn more about your tools. And just because they're on the documentation site does not mean they're trying to use your tool. It may mean they're trying to answer a question about your tool. For example, I own a tool today. I don't like it and I want to get rid of it. What I want to know is the tool that I'm considering similar to the one I already hate? And if it is, I don't want to buy that anymore. So I may end up Googling a bunch of questions about the software. Marketing won't see this because they won't be monitoring your content. And so they won't know. And then the technical communicators won't know because they rely on support to tell them, right? Like, hey, we're getting all these calls about this thing and we have no content about it. So MathWorks may have kind of an audience that's interesting there, but I would be surprised if we don't see content that pops up there in marketing. Here's another final question for you. Do you use usability testing to provide you with additional data for the team? If so, what have you learned from these assessments?
Yes, we use usability testing to guide how we design the navigation and search framework for our content. And we use our metrics to decide where to invest and how. And usability testing really just tells us and confirms for us that our users love examples, and that users enter our site primarily through search the majority of the time. They use navigation aids sparingly, and they'll bounce out and search again if they don't find what they need quickly. I feel like a lot of this stuff our audience probably already knows. These are very sort of general behaviors that we're seeing. And I think it's very typical to find that there's a drop off after that first page. You might see maybe a second, a third click, but after like 3 to 5 pages, I think the drop off can be pretty precipitous. And it's really because, again, well, I mean, I'll get into the every page is page one, Mark Baker's book. It really does get to that. We read his book a while ago and sort of started to think about, well, what does that mean to have online content and how users use our stuff? And I think that it's, I feel very privileged to be in a company that thinks about the documentation very much as a important part of our product. We get design input from very senior stakeholders and really appreciate what the time and attention that we all pay to the documentation and our efforts. But again, when it comes to learning from our customers and trying to figure out where they are, we go where they are. Let's put it that way. We're not trying to change their behavior. We're changing ours to make sure that we're serving their needs.
Excellent, good. And speaking of serving the audience, we have just a little tiny bit of time before the show is over. So in the next 30 seconds, could you provide some advice for technical communication team leaders who would like to begin leveraging data to make decisions? What's the first kind of advice that you could give somebody?
So start small. We started very small and be very selective. Determine what to track and why. And then, Scott, you said this too, and I want to reiterate, determine what you would do. What are your actions you would do with the answers to the questions that you're asking? But be really clear about your questions and solidify them. We debate a lot about the questions we're asking. It's really a team effort, and find the expertise wherever you can get it. I don't know everything. My team is phenomenal. And between all of us, it feels like sometimes that's the way we know what we want to do. And sometimes the answer is to not do something. And so you can argue about that, right? And the other thing I'd say is, again, talking about the way we work, we take the long view, That means that today, if I cannot measure something, doesn't mean that in 6 months I cannot measure it, or 1 year I cannot measure it. Make a plan for how you want to measure it, and that's the only way to make progress. What we couldn't do 3 years ago, we're doing now, and that's because we had to plan it out and take incremental steps to get there. And so
build a list, keep it on the list. If you can't achieve it
That's
today,
right.
look for ways in which you might be able to do it in the future,
Yep.
and be open for new ideas. I know you've always said that as well,
Absolutely.
that you can
Yes.
learn a lot from other people. And
Yes.
so thank you for bringing your team's wisdom together and sharing their experiences with us today. I know it helps a lot of technical documentation team managers to hear from other leaders. So I appreciate that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here.
Excellent. Let me tell the audience a few little things. So I'd like to thank our guests for making time to be here on the show. And I'd like to thank you as well, the audience, for being here. So thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about this. We're still working on our lineup for the shows in the future, but here's what we've got coming up. The Content Advantage shows for 2022 are being formulated right now, so you'll hear some announcements in email and social media about that. But our next webinar will be later today, where Kevin Nichols on his show Let's Talk Personalization will interview Vijay Hanumulu about personalization and digital transformation. It'll be an interesting show from an executive perspective. You just definitely, if you're interested in content personalization, you don't want to miss that show. Then on, December the 8th, I'll be interviewing 3 experts on technical communication and learning content about how those departments can be brought together so that they can share and repurpose their content in practical ways. What are the pros and cons of doing it, and who's doing it, and what are they accomplishing with that? And then Rahel Ann Bailey on December the 9th will interview Adrian Warman about understanding how geometry is involved in driving personalization. This is going to be an interesting take on the topic, and you definitely are not going to want to miss that. And we've got Cruz Saunders back again from Simple A on how to orchestrate content across systems in a decoupled content supply chain. He'll be talking about various ways of connecting content systems and why you might want to do so. And then at the last show of our year, December 16th, before we take a holiday break, Nicholas Haran from Tweddle is going to come and talk to us about cars and content and how structured content is being used to produce in-vehicle help systems and great content experiences inside cars. You've been watching Finding and Using Content Metrics. Today, we've been talking a little bit about MathWorks and how they are creating valuable content by keeping an eye on the numbers and analyzing what they mean and putting those things into place for great business decisions. I appreciate you being here today. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to our guests. Thanks to Zoom and Software for being the sponsor of today's show. Until next time, be well, be safe, and keep doing great work. We'll see you at another webinar in the future. Thanks again for joining us.
Ensure your customers find the answers they need with Zoomin. Bring together product content from all teams and sources to deliver a unified, personalized content experience. Check us out at www.zoominsoftware.com.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.